Hey guys, it's Joshua. So today I'm going to be teaching you the basics of Rhino 3D, how to navigate through the program, how to move around, how to use commands, basically get you familiar with the interface and the screen that you will be looking towards in many of our classes, and what each function basically does for you. Let's begin. This is what Rhino looks like. We have a kind of a 3D space here that now is empty. We have the command line. Josh from the future here. I just want to remind everybody using MacBooks that Rhino looks a little bit different. The whole interface looks basically the same with the viewports and the little menus. The only thing that changes is what we just talked about, the command line. It used to be above here on Windows, but on Mac it is on the side here. So it's kind of a command box or command menu instead of a command line. And if you type something on your keyboard or you go here and click, it will initiate the command and it will give you the options inside of this rectangle here. So it's not going to be on the line here. And if you want to change the options, you actually go to this menu and you click or type whatever you need to do. Okay, just a reminder. We have different command icons. We have a very common um, file menu. This is like Photoshop or Microsoft Word. We have some interesting options here at the bottom, and we have the properties bar, which has also different options here. So, what do we do first? Well, I would like to ask if you are already not using a mouse, three button mouse, so left, right, and middle. I would really appreciate if you could get a mouse. You can use the trackpad, it's possible, but it is much easier to use a mouse because a mouse has specific buttons. With a trackpad, it's one square, sometimes it's double click, sometimes it's one click, and it gets really confusing. And with the mouse is left, right, or middle always. So what can we do? Let's try to just look around our viewports that are now empty. So we can see we have now four: top, front, right, and perspective. And they are all looking at the same thing. This green line is this green line, the same here, the same here. So if I move around, for example, in the top view, what I'm doing here is I'm panning. Basically, I'm kind of grabbing the screen and I'm moving side by side or up and down. That I'm doing by clicking with the right click and click and drag. Same thing here, same thing here. In the perspective view, because it's in 3D, it's a little bit different. So if I right click and drag in perspective, I'm going to rotate around my screen. So right click is the main way that you can manipulate something here. What if I want to pan around like I'm doing on the top view in the perspective view? Well, you can either hold shift and then right click. However, I'm not sure if this, yeah, I'm doing now with the trackpad, it does work, but it's sometimes a little bit finicky. So what can you do? Here, underneath the command line, we have some icons. And I can find in my standard menu the same little hand called pen. And by clicking with the left click, I am initiating the pen command. And I can click and drag. And once I let go, this command is finished. So what just happened is we initiated a command by clicking on this icon. We are executing the command, doing it, and then we are stopping. And you can see here that Rhino basically describes what we are doing in the command line. And I can either start a command by finding the correct little icon in all of these menus, or I can type it. So in this case, the hand is called pen. So if I would, with my keyboard, I don't have to go to the command line and click there. I can be moving around. I just type on my keyboard P-A-N, pan, and then press enter, I'm initiating this command. And how Rhino works, it's basically a little conversation every time you're running a command. You say something, Rhino asks you something. So I'm saying I want to pan. I can see after I typed and I press enter, Rhino is asking me to click and drag on the screen to pan. Yes, and now the command is finished. Same thing, next to that is the rotate view. I can do it here in the rotate. But what would happen if I do the rotate view on the top? Because this is flat looking from top down, or in the front or in the right. Well, I would not make it into a top view anymore. Now I have two perspectives. How can I fix that? You can do this command, which basically resets it to the normal, or you can click on this little option. Here there's many things, we will go through it at some point, but you can go down here to set view and then top view. Now it's back. Fantastic. What else do we have? So now you know what the viewports are, what the command line is, what the icons do. Let's try another command. The most simple one, a line. So I'm now going to draw a line. And I told Rhino with my command, I want to make a line. And Rhino is asking me, what is the start of the line? So I'm going to go back here to my viewport. And you can see if I move in the top view, I can see my cursor moving around in all these other views of the same 3D space. I'm just going to pick a random point here. And if I left click, I'm indicating that's the start of my line. And then Rhino is asking me another question. What is the end of the line? And then again, I can go somewhere and I can click. And then because that's all that I can do with this command, Rhino will stop it by itself. So now I have a line on my top view. Because a line is infinitely thin, I can see it from my front view, but because I'm looking at from the side, it looks just like a straight line. Same thing here, but I know from my top view that it is a diagonal. And in my perspective view, if I would look in 3D space, I can see exactly what it is. To go into this focus view, you just double left click on the name of your preferred view, and it will blow it up to the rest of the screen. So we have now a line. What can we do with this? So what we can do to move it around space is turn on this nice little setting here called the gumball. What is the gumball? The gumball is this. Nice colorful options. And I have here different little symbols in different directions represented by different colors that do different things. Let's start with the most basic one, moving. So let's say I want to move this line to the left. Basically, I click and drag to move it to the left, or front and back, or up and down. What happens if I go to top is there is no blue line because I'm looking down into the shape. I would never know what to do with it. I would never know how much down or how much up I'm going. So if you would want to move this shape up or down, you have to do it in the other options. So here in the front, I can see I'm moving it up or down, and I can see on my perspective view that it is going up or down. So that's the gumball for move. We also have the arcs that are rotating. So if I would click and drag on these arcs, I would rotate the shape in different directions. So by doing this, you can already manipulate a lot of this shape to move it around, rotate it to fit in the place that you want. So we have move and we have arc. We also have this square, which is scale. And it's a bit difficult to see now because it's not really straight, but let's try to straighten this out. If I would now choose my shape and I would drag this, you can see I am scaling it to be bigger or smaller. And of course, it doesn't really work on this direction because it is just a infinitely thin object. You cannot make it thicker because it is just one thin, infinitely thin um, curve or line. I can also not do anything regarding um, this direction because it is also infinitely thin. There's no height. Great. Well, this is all fine, but the problem with Gumball is that it is not precise. I am moving it around the way that I kind of want to, but I never know exactly where it's going to be. So I can move it closer to a certain point, but I can never move it precisely somewhere. I can turn on this other option called Grid Snap, which will do little intervals of the units that we are having in this file. For example, my file, if I look down here, is in millimeters. So it's now jumping 1 millimeter every time. That is already better. But because I drew it without the grid snap, this will never fit into anything. So how would we fix that? Basically, by using commands. So instead of going with the gumball, which is actually just doing the command in a more friendly way, I can, instead of clicking here and dragging, I can also type move. And now Rhino is asking me, where do you want to move this from? So I want to move this from here to here. Great. That's already better. However, my little dots, let's say that my point here should be beginning from this center of the space. How would I do that? Well, I can move. Maybe let's turn off the grid snap for now. I'm going to click here and then I'm going to move it there. Perfect. Yeah, it's right there. Actually, if I zoom in, it's not. And if I look around here in the 3D view, because I moved it only in the front, it's completely outside. So what can we do? We can turn our attention to this menu here, oh snap. What this does is it lets your mouse snap into specific points of the drawing or the space to give you more precision. So let's turn on end point and point. So now if I type again my command move and I move my mouse to here, you can see even though my mouse is not exactly there, it is snapping, it's locking in to the end of this line here. And essentially, now that I click here, I am picking that precise point and moving it somewhere on the screen. Now if I go in the perspective view, you can see I'm really moving it to the grid. And I click here, it is precisely where I wanted it to be. And we can do the same by clicking here, move, and then selecting it and then dragging to where we want. So now we have a perfectly straight little line in this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 millimeter interval in our space. Amazing. What if we want to be even more precise? We can do the same thing. So let's select here our object. I'm going to turn off the gumball for now because we don't want to use it anymore. I'm going to select my point and then I'm going to move again. So I can click on the point that I want to move and I can see where it's going to go. And because I know that in this file, my grid is 1 millimeter every time this little square here is showing up, I can move it, for example, 3 millimeters in that direction by following the little squares. But let's say I'm really zoomed out or I'm maybe outside of my grid. I don't know how much I'm going. Well, you can look at the bottom of your screen here and it says in the units how much you are moving. So this is 1, 2, 3, perfect. On the bottom it says 3 as well. But let's say I don't want to count every time. I just want to move it 16 millimeters. So let's do 16 on our keyboard. And you can see now it doesn't matter in which direction that I move, it will always be moving 16 millimeters in that specific direction. So let's say we want to go down. Now our line is 16 millimeters bigger. Joshua, so far, this is really small stuff. I know. But to understand this as a basic will help you so much later that going a little bit slower now in the beginning and really understanding what it means to move, what it means with the O snap, what it means with the gumball, will help you out a ton, I promise you. Uh, so we are kind of reaching the end of our first session here. Let's look a little bit more on what the OSNAP can do for us. So let's turn on now if I want to do a move command again. No, I typed it wrong. Let's go. So I am snapping here to the end, but I'm not really snapping anywhere else besides the end. If I turn on the middle, it will always find the precise middle of a certain line or object. If I turn on near, it will kind of magnetize into the line itself. So I can see it's the nearest point it can find along this line, and then suddenly it will snap in the middle, and then at the end. If I do my move command, I turned off my grid snap, so it's not really gluing to the grid anymore, and it's also going in all kind of directions. I can turn on ortho, which is orthographic, which will basically lock my shape to move only in 90 degrees. So either left, right, up, or down, which can also be very helpful sometimes if you're trying to make straight lines. And sometimes you don't want to have the O snap, you just want to move around. You can either hold, I think it's Alt. So let's make another line here. Yes, if I hold Alt key or Option in a MacBook, I'm turning off temporarily the O snap, so I can then move my mouse freely around. If I let go, it will be snapping again. So now I'm making another line, enter, and there we go. So this was already 20 minutes of knowledge, which is quite a lot. Yeah, I'm sorry it's a little bit boring, but I promise you the next session will be a bit more interesting. So, today you learned about the different viewports, you learned how to navigate and move around with the pen and rotate, you learned what the command line is, what the command icons mean, you learned about the OSNAP, you learned about the dialogue of Rhino and yourself with asking something, answering something, and you learned about the gumball, the grid snap, and the ortho. So now that we know how to use Rhino, we can go a little bit further. So I'll see you in the next video or in the next class next week. Thank you.